You have customers inside P&G, all right? And do you treat your customers... Now, a customer in P&G is someone you pass your stuff along to. I mean, whether it's 101-inch rolls or a report or whatever. Somebody probably in P&G gets something that you work on, and that's your customer. Now, do you treat your customers the way Stu Leonard does? Well, probably not. I mean, not going around hugging them and all that sort of stuff. And why don't you? Well, they're really captive customers. I mean, they don't have anyone else to go to. If they need a 101-inch roll, they have to get it from you. I mean, then that's it. But then, you know, it's just an interesting question to ask. Is there anything more that you could do for your customers than you're doing now? Or do you just, is it sort of, you take them for granted? I mean, whatever you make, they're going to take, so, or what? What I'd like to do at this point is to have you just write down on a piece of paper. You don't have to hand it in or anything, but just write down, first of all, what your products are. I mean, what is it that you make, right? And so just take a minute or so to write down and be specific about what your products are. You as an individual, what do you work on and make? What is the product? And a product can be either goods or services. Okay, because a service is a product. So what are your products? Just write those down, your products. Then consider the question of who are your customers? I mean, who gets each one of these products? So the first question is, what are your products? Now the next one, I mean, try to link up those products with customers, and the more specific you are, the more helpful it will be to you. Who are the customers for these things? And for some of you, it's very simple. It's just one customer, and that's it. For some of you, you may have many customers, but who are the main customers? Okay, the next question, this is the last one for right now, and that is, what do the customers want in this product? So what are your products, and who are the customers? And what do they want? And what do they want to get from you? So there are three questions so far. What are your products? And who are the customers? And what do they want? And I said I would stop there. But I'd like to give you a fourth question, but you don't need to write down the answer right now, but maybe sometime you would like to think about it. Here is the fourth question after what are your products and who are your customers and what do they want? The fourth question is, how do you know that's what they want? So we'll just let that hang. But I would like you to write down, how do you know that's what they want? Now, Stu Leonard had a very simple answer, and that is, he asks them. Another question you might want to write down is, when's the last time you talked to the customer and asked them what they really wanted? And connected with that, there's a whole series of questions, right? About how are the communications with your customer, and how much in touch are you with the customer? And are there things that you could do better with that interface between you and your customer? And to be pretty creative about it, too. I mean, ultimately, when P&G sends out product to the customers out there, there's an 800 number where customers can get back in touch and ask questions and so on. Is there someone where you work that is someone who worries about customer relations, and some place where the customer is somebody that they can talk to? Things like that. Okay, now I raised lots of questions. So, at how many tables here do we have at least one customer supplier at the table? I mean, that is what I'm talking about, is you have a product and you turn it over to some customer inside P&G, and do any of those pairs, are they present at any of these tables? That table, that table, that table, that table, that table. Okay, so it's okay, well look, especially at those tables, I think it would be interesting for the customer and supplier just to share with one another and let the other people listen and contribute as they wish as to what they wrote down in terms of that interchange. I mean, the supplier to read out what they put down as what their product was and who their customer was and what their customer wanted, and to see if the customer says, yeah, that's what we want, or whether the customer has some other ideas about what they would want. Now, what I'm getting at is a very important point, and it has helped a lot of organizations, and that is just simply getting some of this communication going among these linkages in the company, where something is produced and is passed along to another stage and is worked on some more and is passed on to another stage, to actually get the people who produce the product, and it can be a goods or service, again, it can be either one, physical goods or it can be a service, to actually have the person who produces it go down for a step or two or three and talk to the people and find out, how they're doing as far as producing this product. Because sometimes just amazing things are learned by a simple little interchange like that. It's like the person who's doing the production will feel very good and very proud of the fact that they've been trying for the last 2 years to really get this particular aspect right. And then they go down a step or two and they find out that those people don't care about that particular thing that this person is knocking themselves out trying to get right. What they say is something tactful like, but if you could help by making sure that this is square, or making sure that when it comes to us that this particular thing is done this way, then that would really make it a lot better for us here. And the person realizes, that's simple, I can do that. And also that they don't have to knock themselves out trying to do this other thing, which turns out to be maybe at some time in the past it made sense to meet this particular specification or whatever, but those people down there don't care. And if you're trying to meet or exceed the needs and expectations of the customers, there does get to be a point beyond which it's stupid to just be fiddling, to have your resources going into fiddling with something that really doesn't matter, when in fact you could spend some of your resources working on something that really does matter to the customer, and the only way to find out is talking to the customer. So what I'd like to do now, okay, for those tables that have a customer and a supplier at the same table who can talk to one another and just, see what you both have written down, especially the producer, right? The producer decided who the customer was and what the customer wants. And just to check that out with the customer and see how that goes, and just talk about in the group some of these issues. And the other tables that don't have a customer and a producer at the same table, just talk a bit about some of these questions that you've just dealt with. Okay? And I would suggest that there's some tables that have 12 people, right? Yeah, I mean, tables that have lots of people, if you would split into two groups of 6 that talk, that would make more sense, it seems to me anyway, because it's easier to talk in a group of 6 than it is in a group of 12. So let's just take a few minutes for you to share with one another whatever things you care to out of these questions. Don't forget to talk about some of these issues later, and especially, barriers that exist between customers and suppliers within P&G, and to try to identify what the barriers are and how you can work to get rid of some of these barriers and so on. All right, well, I just have a few minutes to wrap up essentially one more point that I want to make, and then we'll take a break. This is the way that I define quality in the first instance, is meeting or exceeding the needs and expectations of customers. But there are really lots of definitions of quality, and that one has to do with the customer down here. Okay? And that's what you want to do, okay, down there. But then you can track it back one step to the product, that is, the goods or the services. And you can talk about the quality with respect to the goods and services. That is, some kind of specifications. And that's the kind of thing that was talked about between customers and the producers at these tables was, okay, how do you translate this kind of notion, which is not very quantitative at all, in fact it's not quantitative, into some more operational kind of definitions when it comes to the goods or services that are coming along. How do you tell by looking at this stage, when you look at the product, whether it's a good product and whether it's a quality product? I mean, how do you translate what the customer wants into specifications and some operational definitions at this previous stage? How would somebody recognize whether the product was good or not? And then you can go back even one step further and say, how should we set up a process, and what are the quality definitions there, so that when you run this process, you know that the product you're going to produce is quality, and when it gets to the customer, that they will recognize it as quality in terms of this. How do what does quality mean back here? And then you can go back even further and talk about the suppliers and say, what does it mean for us back here? How do you get quality back here? And what does quality mean back here, so that when it goes through the process, comes out as a product and gets to the customer, we'll have quality all along the line. And then there's another aspect of this quality which has to do with what the engineers are supposed to be concerned with, which is designing the processes and the products in the first place. What does quality mean back there at that stage? What does that mean? What is a quality design? Well, quality design is one such that when you go through the whole process of building this new facility and producing this stuff and getting it to the customer, that they will be satisfied, and they will be satisfied because this is right, and this is right because this is right. And what does this being right mean? It's a robust process. It's going to produce good stuff. That's what it means. And you can take care of a lot of that by doing the design right in the first place. And that was in that quote that I read about the semiconductor industry. The person said, it's really amazing what the Japanese can do as far as the design stage, way up at that end. And this is getting into some pretty sophisticated kind of stuff, but those of you who are in engineering and design might want to look up some of the work of a fellow by the name of Taguchi. Because what he's worried about is the quality of the design in the first place. And there's quite a bit of interest up at that end, because what's happened in this country is the auto industry has really been the driving force, in the sense that they were in deep trouble. They're still in deep trouble. They realized they had to do something. They really did. And so then they went to their suppliers and they said, okay, you guys, you have to give us good stuff, or you're not going to be our suppliers anymore. And the reaction of the suppliers was, okay, we'll put some guy at the back door and he'll sort out the good stuff and the bad stuff, and you'll only get good stuff from us. And Ford and General Motors said, that doesn't get it. That's not, somebody's got to pay for making the bad stuff. And we don't want to be the ones paying for it. We want to have you make good stuff. So don't just have someone sorting out the good stuff from the bad stuff. At this stage, we want you to have statistical process control on the processes, so that when you make it, it's going to be good, and we don't have to have checking at the back door. That's what they said. So that's more sophisticated. But you can get even more sophisticated. And that is to move it upstream even further and get back to the design stage and get into design engineering and so on, and say, look, let's do a quality job back here. Let's design the processes so they're robust, so they'll work, so that we don't even need to worry about statistical process control. And we certainly don't have to have anybody checking at the back door, but we don't even have to have the statistical process control. Because we've designed it so well, and cheaply, that means also. Cheap. It's not going to cost a lot. And we can use cheap components that may be quite variable, but we've designed the process so that we can take the supplies, the raw materials that may not be very high quality, but because the design is so good and it's so robust, that we're going to produce higher quality stuff in the end, cheaper than the competitors. And that's where the big payoff is. And that's where a lot of U.S. industries are looking now. So it's a natural progression to having someone at the back door checking, inspection, statistical process control. But people are beginning in this country to look at the whole design stage too. So the quality definitions all up and down that stream. And the farther upstream you can get, the better off you are. Okay, finally, let me just put up a formula that's not rigid. I mean, it's not very rigorous, okay? It's just sort of a loose kind of thing to talk about, and then we'll stop. Productivity can be thought of, I think, I mean, it's useful to think this way just for a little bit, but don't get too serious about it. That there's a quantity of stuff you produce, there's a quality of it, which relates to, the percentage of broke, say, that you make. And then there's the cost. And the more stuff you produce, the higher the productivity. But of course, somebody can produce a lower quantity and get out higher productivity if the quality is greater. I mean, if you stop making so much broke, and so the quality is higher, then productivity would go up. And the higher the cost is, the less the productivity. The final point I'd like to make before this coffee break is just this, that U.S. industry and management has tended to focus on the quantity or production levels and cost. Those have been the drivers. And it's really produced some very, very funny kind of results sometimes. I mean, in terms of, let's reduce the cost, then they start buying from cheaper and cheaper suppliers that don't have the quality, and that creates all kinds of problems and costs that tend to be hidden. Or everybody trying to make do with this poor quality raw material. And it's sort of penny wise and pound foolish a lot of times. And I don't know, maybe P&G doesn't have any problems of that kind, but a lot of companies do. And you just, just the stories, they just tumble out one after the other of, purchasing, buying on price tag alone, and then you get stuff that, pens that don't work and things like that. And then as far as quantity goes, when you have production rates, at some companies I know they have monthly quotas, and about 30% of the shipments are made on the last 2 days of the month. 30%. I mean, it's like we gotta get it out, push it out, and out it goes. And of course, quality really suffers then. In fact, I even heard one story where they had all the stuff, but they had a part that was missing out of this piece of equipment, but they just shipped it out anyway, because all they need to do is run off a lot of little labels, a lot of little pieces of paper that they dropped in on top of each one of these packages, and the paper said, do not install this equipment, and call our service representative to come and install this piece of equipment, and do not use, unless he installs it. And then they would call up this number, and the serviceman would come out, and he would have this piece that was missing in his pocket, and he would come out and he would slip that in and then install it, and that would be the installation. So manufacturing was taking place out there. But I mean, it's just crazy what some of these things are that happen. Now, Mike Mulvaney yesterday mentioned this chain reaction, which is, those of you who've heard Deming will recognize it as Deming's chain reaction, and is to use this as the driver, the quality, and then to say, we're going to have a quality process. And what that means is that what you will have is, for you it would be less broke and things like that. Okay? You just have less rework. Okay? Where you have a quality process, then that's what you would have. You'd have less of this kind of stuff, and that would drive down the costs. And that would have the prices go down of your products. And then what that would mean is that you get more market share, and then the quantities would go up, production rates would go up, and then you get more profits, more earnings, more jobs. And profits was a word that I didn't hear yesterday. I don't know whether that's a bad word or what, but anyway, earnings and things. But anyhow, you do want to success in whatever terms you want to talk about it. But the fact is that if you start with quality as the driver, it automatically takes care of these other two things. And you do get higher productivity. And what Deming says, and this starts on page 1 of his book, he says most American managers think of quality and productivity as trade-offs. And they can either get high quality and low productivity, or they get high productivity but low quality, and they're trade-offs. And Deming says that's wrong. I mean, this is Deming's chain reaction, that if you worry about quality and make that the focus and that the driver, we're going to have quality processes, then you're going to have them run more efficiently. You're going to have less broke, less rework, less inefficiencies, less hassles, less frustrations. All those the bad things are going to go down because the quality is going to be going up. And then the cost will go down, and then the prices can go down, and you get more market share, then these quantities and production rates will go up, and you'll get success in terms of jobs, in terms of profits, earnings, and productivity will go up. And so that's what I meant, and that's the point I wanted to get to when I say that you can think of quality improvement as the driver and TQA as being the driver, as a single thing to focus on, with everybody in a single-minded kind of way. I don't want to use the word fanatical, but that doesn't have the right kind of connotations. But I mean, a real determination to get quality up and to focus on quality and insist on quality, then that can serve as a useful driver that will take all these other things along with it. It's a very interesting concept, and those of you who've never heard it before, I don't know what you think about it. It may strike you as strange or whatever, but that's Deming's chain reaction. And Mike Mulvaney made reference to this yesterday. And all these managers from P&G who've gone to hear Deming, that's the first thing they hear Deming talk about. All right, we have a 15-minute break now for a coffee, and that's back up in the back. So 15 minutes, we'll come back again. No trouble with the line workers, the hourly workers at understanding what Deming is talking about. Their typical attitude is, well, it's about time. I mean, this is what we've been saying ever since we've been working here, and so why don't we get on with it? And they think he has very good ideas. In fact, when Deming had one of his 4-day seminars, I think it was on the West Coast, I believe it was in San Diego, he went into the bar of the hotel late one night, and he said all these people at his seminar were top management people, except they had made it a point of inviting along 6 of the union leaders, and they were there. And when Deming went into the bar at night, these 6 union leaders were in there having some drinks. And Deming said that he knew they had been drinking, and he knew they wanted him to feel good, wanted Deming to feel good. But nevertheless, it was true that they made Deming an honorary member of all 6 of their unions that night in the bar. So, and Deming, when he goes into companies, he often wants to walk around and talk to the workers and find out what the problems are, and then he talks to the presidents and CEOs and says, you know what your problems are? They're this, this, and this, and the CEOs and presidents don't know that. And so Deming acts as a conduit from the workers to the top many times. One of the problems, however, is that when people go away to Deming's 4-day seminars, they tend to be top management, and some of the companies will come back and say, he really makes a lot of sense, and so let's us get on with it, let's do it. Then the top managers say, okay, we're going to do this thing. So then what you have, and many companies in the U.S. are in this situation right now, that the top management says, we're going to do this. And then the sort of people at the bottom of the hierarchy, down there doing the work on the lines, they understand what it is and they're ready to go. But then middle management is the place where it doesn't seem to go. A lot of companies, although the top people can see that this is what they want to do, and the people on the line can see this is what they want to do, and they want to get on with it, the middle managers, that's where the trouble is. And I just mention this to you as a fact. This is where there's difficulty in moving in transforming organizations. It's in the middle management. Now, why is that so? I don't know. And I've had discussions with people, and a lot of people have a lot of ideas, but I just put that out on the table as something you can think about as to why it's difficult for companies. And I guess the prior question that is that the situation at P&G or not? So, okay. We're going to look at a Deming tape where he goes over his point number 1 after I go through this point number 4 and just mention a few aspects of Deming's philosophy. So we have talked about these first 3. Now some aspects, these are just some points that I think are part of this whole thing, and that is first, I think what we need is a new vision of what a job is. And what I mean by that, let me just what I mean by that is simply that in addition to the other things that you do right now and you think of as what your job is something else. And it's something I heard said yesterday at this presentation. And that is, that as part of your job, it wasn't put in these words, but let me put it in these words, is that part of your job, you're supposed to go around with this question in your head all the time. And the question being, how can we get things to work better around here? How can we get things to work better around here? And that should be a question in your head, and you should do something about it. I mean, if you have some ideas about how things could work better, then you share it with other people and you talk about it. Or if there's a problem you see, that you say, this is a problem. This is one of the barriers. This is, with our customer, we're not satisfying this customer in this way. Is there some way we can do that? Or, looking back the other way, we're having this particular problem with the supplier. And is there some way we can work around that problem or solve that problem? But this question of how can we make things work better around here? And to make that a vital part of what you do when you come to work, and that everybody's working on that. And I can tell you, from what I've seen elsewhere, that it's really a lot more fun to have that as part of the whole process. And for everybody to be working in that direction of trying to figure out how to make things work better. I mean, in the first place, you think of frustrations you have and hassles. I mean, Ben Boer mentioned, this process of getting new projects going and all this red tape you have to go through. But you just tackle those kind of problems and you say, look, this is a problem. And let's try to do something about it. Let's come up with some ideas. And what I also heard yesterday was, if you have some ideas, then try them. See if they work. And if they don't work, that's okay. Seems to me that takes a lot of trust to believe that. And I don't know whether that's really, that level of trust exists in P&G, but I know it doesn't exist in most, if any, other corporation I know, where people would actually go out and try things, and if they fail, think, well, that's okay, we were told to try, and I tried and it didn't work, that's all right. But that's what I heard yesterday, you're asked to do. Well, that's what I heard. I don't know whether you heard the same thing, but that's what I heard. Now, the next little aspect that I want to mention that I think it really helps a lot of people to think about processes and think about the organization and think about P&G as this whole lot of processes. Now, what do I mean by process? I don't just mean the paper making or converting as a process. All of those are processes. But getting down to more specific kind of smaller processes. And to give you some examples, things like this. Cooling a chemical or heating up a chemical or welding metal or cutting wood or taking off bark or hiring an engineer or maintaining vehicles or typing a letter or handling orders or running meetings or writing reports. Anything where you take some stuff in and you do something to it and you produce something else, that's a process. And there are processes all over the place. And so, what do you want to do with all these processes? Well, is there any process that exists in P&G that's perfect? I haven't found any processes that are perfect anywhere else. What you want to do is you want to have continuous, never-ending improvement of all these processes, of all these products, and all these systems. But if you find the troublesome processes, then you work on them and you try to make them better. And there are processes all around you. And so the game is to just work on some processes that are causing you lots of frustrations or problems or inefficiencies or whatever, and make them better. Okay? Now the skills that are needed in transforming an organization, there are really two. And there are human skills and there are these technical skills. And what I mean by technical skills are things like problem-solving tools, statistical methods, SMQI, technical scientific approach to problems, that kind of thing. And what I mean by human skills is how to get groups together, how to have them work effectively together, how to get teams really going, how to get people communicating, how to break down barriers of that kind. And what I see in P&G, and what's so exciting to me is that these elements are here, right, in a way that they're not present in other companies. And that's really true, especially on the human skills side. And the way some companies are going about transformation of the organization is they will have a lead statistician, like some PhD statistician, some professional statistician as being the lead person over here, the resource person on the technical side, and then some trained PhD in organizational development to help and be a resource person over here. And then the organization would have other statisticians and other organizational development people to help this transformation along. But it's really, I think the biggest thing that I learned last year in working on this whole business is that there are the statisticians who know about things like SMQI and just the technical part of that. And they know that there are contributions they can make to a corporation, with statistical methods. And yet when they go off and they do all this statistics and really good control charts and all the rest, they don't seem to have the impact that they think they should have. And meanwhile, there's a whole other group of people who are organizational development kind of people who are really terrific at getting people together in a meeting and they talk and they share ideas and they go through a process and they prioritize problems and they figure out what's the biggest one that they should really work on and everybody buys into it and they're going to go out and they're motivated and they're going to do it. And then somehow the impact that they think they should have isn't there either. And the thing I learned was that if you give these organizational development type people just a little bit of help about statistical tools for now tackling the problem, analyzing the problem, figuring out what it is and how to solve it, their power can be multiplied many times over. And also if you give the statisticians and the technical kind of people some help with organizational development skills, that the power they can have is just multiplied enormously. It's incredible what can happen. And it's putting those together, though. And what I found is that the statisticians, they don't even know that there are people in organizational development. And the people in organizational development are a bit more aware and sensitive and everything, and they know about statisticians and so on, but they don't want to talk to them because they're all those technical people and they use all those formulas and they can't understand them. So the two groups don't get together. That's typically now in other companies, and I don't know what it's like in P&G, but anyway, it's joining those two in a synergistic kind of way that can just produce amazing results. And it's a skillful blending of these two. Another thing I'd like to mention is a concept of potential information. And what I'm thinking of is around all these processes, there is potential information. And you can either use it or not use it. And most places, people just waste it. It's as if they start off the day by saying, there's all this potential information that surrounds all these processes, information that we could generate and use to make the processes work better, but should we use it today or waste it? Let's waste it. And so they waste it, and then day after day, it's as if they have a meeting like that every morning. And of course they don't, but it's as if they do. I mean, there's valuable information just running down the drain. And if you have everybody turned on and looking at processes and saying, how can we make them work better? Well, you have to get some information. You need to get some data. I mean, that's the way you really solve problems and get to things. You get some data. And someplace along the way, I'd like to tell you about some union workers in this one place who are really tuned into this whole thing, and they know the value of data, and they get data, they analyze situations, and then they show it to management, and then management goes along. And the union people are managing their managers. Yeah, I'd just like to make one comment and then see if any of you have any questions or comments just on this point number one. I guess it was John Saxton who said that one of the things that makes Deming's message so difficult to understand is its simplicity. And what I think of is when I hear somebody say something and they have an idea, I may agree or disagree. But if I agree, there's like a spectrum. It's like, well, I already knew that before, and that's obvious. Or I didn't know that before, and that's interesting. Or I didn't know that before, but that's very, very interesting. Or, wow, that's really tremendous. Or it's getting way down at the other end. It's a profound thought. You know, and the profound and the obvious are as far apart as you can get them on this spectrum. But somehow, sometimes, it seems as though the most profound things that I learn about, and then I go tell someone about it, like my wife or whatever, I say, boy, this is something profound, and I tell her, and it's like, that's it? I mean, that's not very profound. I mean, that's obvious or whatever. I mean, it's like the spectrum doesn't really stretch along this way. It's some kind of a circle, and the profound sometimes get mixed up with the obvious. I mean, something that can be very profound to you or to a corporation or whatever, to somebody else just sounds, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, that's obvious. And so when I hear Deming say some things that he says, I think, well, that's obvious. And other people might think that's obvious. But what I'd like you to do, if you're having that kind of difficulty, and a lot of people do, I mean, they hear it and it sounds like so much sense and it's obvious and everything else that some people tend to discount it or write it off. And I would ask you just to, if you're having those kind of thoughts, to try to suspend them and just to try to relax and just try to listen to what he's really saying and to get his message, because a lot of people, including me, think that it's really profound. I mean, what he's saying. And there's another thing that I'd like to mention to you, and that is that it's not, we're going to go through these 14 points, but it's not as if you sort of pick and choose among them, or this is a good one and that's a bad one, or whatever. You really have to listen to the whole thing, and it's like a fabric or something. It's like, bounce or something. It's just, it's all together, or even a piece of paper. It's like each one of the points is something like a fiber, and all of them together make up what it is. I know a friend of mine is a Japanese history professor, and he specializes in modern Japan and around the occupation. And he was interested in hearing Deming when Deming came to Madison, and he watched him for a while, and he just said, boy, Deming is like a Zen master. I mean, he's just sitting there saying all these things that just sort of fly off, and some of them even sound irrational or whatever, or obvious, but you're supposed to just sit there and put them all together. That was the reaction of this Japanese professor. Anyway, But does anybody at this point have any questions or reactions or comments as far as what you've heard Deming say for this first point? Or should we just roll on to point number 2? Anybody? Okay, well, let's just roll on to number 2. Once you get into this, you may find something happening to you, and it started to happen to me, and that is when Deming gives his 4-day seminars, he's forever giving examples of his airplanes and his hotels and all that. I mean, this business of just not accepting quality, or well, low quality of service. And it's not that, I don't really believe it's because he's cantankerous or he just wants to yell at people or whatever, but it's just really frustrating to be in a place and realize that if they just had their people turned on to what we're talking about, namely trying to satisfy the customers and trying to improve things all the time, that those things you see simply would not exist. I mean, just 2 very recent examples, and let me tell you about them. I was in this one hotel. I really like this hotel. It's in a special place to me. I mean, it's back at Princeton is where it is, and it's right in Palmer Square. It's in the middle of the city. It's across the street from the campus, and it's a nice old place. And, I mean, the last few times I've been there, the quality of the service is just going down and down and down. When I was checking out, I wasn't angry or whatever. I just said, I'm really sad to see the quality of this place just going down and down and down. And they said, well, what is it? You know, what is it? And then I said something about the shower, you know, that it goes hot and cold and dribbles out and stops, and you know, all while you have it turned on. And it does all these weird things all by itself. It's not unlike the blue van. It just has a mind of its own. And they said, oh, well, we just spent, you know, $10,000 putting a new pump and on and on. They went, what else is there? And I said, look, I'm not interested in just going down a whole long list of things and you giving me excuses for all this. I just say, you know, it's sad, you know, see what's going on. And then a manager heard this going on. He jumped out in this. He says, oh, what is it? We really care, and all the rest. And, you know, all this. And I just said, well, it didn't seem as though they cared about the customers. That's just in a nutshell. And he said, well, I can see that maybe your perception of what's going on is not, you know, what's really going on. I said, look, my perception is the only thing that counts. I mean, it's the customer. I mean, Stu Leonard, he doesn't say, well, it's your perception that we don't have good fish, or it's your perception or whatever. I mean, that's the reality, is the perception of the customer. Well, what happened then was the manager actually took me to lunch. And we talked, and they were trying to do things, it turned out. It was sort of pathetic things that they were doing, but I mean, pathetic in the sense of what they really could be doing with no more effort. I mean, they were working, you know, they were trying to do things, but they weren't being very smart about it. And they mentioned the thing that really got them going was lawsuits from these showers. I mean, if it takes that to get people going. But anyway, they were going. Then last week I was in a hotel, and then the manager came by, and a couple of us were there, and he said, how are things? And we said, well, you know, the quality here is not very good. And it was just facts, you know, about how the food was served and how this happened and how breakfast was late, and people we'd talked to got the wrong breakfast after they waited there a long time, and, you know, and on. I mean, there was a whole long list of things. And he says, well, have you had dinner yet? And we said, yeah, we just had dinner. And then he says, oh, well, I would invite you to our gourmet restaurant. You could have a meal on us. And we said, well, we'll be here tomorrow. And he said, okay, well, how many are in your group? And we said 6. He said, okay, well, dinner's on me. So we went upstairs and had this. Well, this dinner was very, very nice. So I'm not saying this is a way to get free lunches and dinners, but it is, I mean, once you get sensitized to the fact of there are businesses and there are processes, and they're trying to satisfy customers, and when it's so obvious they're not satisfying the customers and they don't seem to give a damn, well, it's nice to tell them. Well, I think it's nice to tell them that, they're customers who care. And if customers don't say anything, then why should they try to do anything? So, and it does tie into Deming's point, it seems to me, about there's a new level of expectations to me. And I think, well, I predict anyway, that when you get into this, the same kind of thing will happen to you. And if you're sitting here thinking, well, he's sort of a cranky, arrogant person to go around and telling off all these hotels and everybody else, but it's not that at all. It's like more of a feeling of sadness and sort of realizing with the same amount of work, same amount of dedication, not working any harder, they could be making all their customers happier. Not just me. That's not the point. They could be providing a better service. It's so simple. If they just get sort of oriented a bit differently. And it's all around us. And you can translate that into inside P&G. Why should you accept certain things? You shouldn't. And it's not a question of going back to your supplier who's giving you this stuff that's not quite right and verbally beating them up or whatever. It's more like, look, we have a problem and you should care about us because we're your customer. And they should say, yeah, well, we do care about you. What is it we can do? And let's work together and let's try to solve it. And not working harder, but just working smarter. But I predict that this will happen to you people, and at least some of you. That you'll be sensitized to it, and you'll see it everywhere. And you'll realize that there's a level of expectation in the U.S. everywhere that just could be raised up, and it would make life better for all of us. And it might make it better nationally in terms of corporations who could make more money, and that would be good for the country. Okay, does anybody have any reactions or questions to these first two points that Deming has talked about?